UFC 294, one of the biggest and best cards of the year is coming up this weekend. And guys, today we're going to be breaking down every fight on the card, going from the bottom to the top with timestamps. If you'd like to skip to any particular part of the video, we're going to get into it just a second. Before we do though, I do want to say hello everybody and welcome back to another video. If you were new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with too many YouTube channels, and welcome back to another full card breakdown and prediction video, this time for UFC 294. Let's get into it with the first fight. Guys, timestamps are there if you'd like to skip to any part. Starting off the card with an absolute banger, we have Bruno Silva versus the debut of Sharabutdin Magomedov. Now, if you follow the channel or if you follow any like hardcore MMA talk, like man, people have been looking forward to this debut. I'll just start with him because, to be honest with you, there's not really a lot on him, but from what we've seen outside the UFC, this dude is vicious. This dude is vicious. He comes forward. He wants to pretty much kill you. That's what he goes on about it. And he's had a perfect record so far. He's been looking great every single time that we see him. But of course, he's never taken on anybody even remotely to the UFC talent level. That's why I'm so excited for his debut, because he's taking on Bruno Silva, a guy who kind of has the Michael Johnson effect. He can beat anybody. He can lose anybody. I do believe Bruno Silva is a very underrated fighter. As you can see, especially as of recently, he's had some wins. He's had some losses against like various levels of competition, right? But the only thing is, this last performance, just 3 months ago against Brendan Allen, the performance wasn't horrible. Like, he traded shots with Brendan Allen for a while, and Brendan Allen ended up catching him and finding a submission afterwards. But I do believe, like, Brendan Allen is a very underrated fighter in himself. Like, people need to pay more attention to that guy. I don't know how I feel. Like, looking into this fight, this is why I don't really know how to feel about it, because Magomedov hasn't taken on a guy like Bruno Silva, and at the same time, Bruno Silva could just have one of those nights where he just doesn't show up. You know what I mean? Bruno Silva is just one of those fighters. That's why I'm kind of like, I haven't entirely been impressed by Bruno Silva. I never really have, although I do think he's underrated. And I don't want to just go, okay, this guy's been finishing everybody outside the UFC. This dude looks like an absolute killer. But I just get a feeling, man. I get a feeling Sharabutdin Magomedov could potentially be the real deal, and I like what I've seen from him so far. 29 years old in his prime. I think he's going to win, man. I got to pick Sharabutdin Magomedov, but I'm definitely not betting on this one. But give me Magomedov to win this fight. Moving on to the next fight, we have Jinh Yu Frey taking on Victoria Dudakova. Now, guys, this is a pretty easy fight to predict in my opinion, but I say that, and then I'm like, you never know what happens with WMMA, right? So, Jinh Yu Frey, one of those like extremely low-level WMMA fighters, especially in the strawweight division. She's 11-9. While she has lost 3 in a row, she definitely won the fight against Vanessa Demopoulos. I don't know why the judges constantly give Vanessa Demopoulos wins when she doesn't deserve them, but other than that, it doesn't really matter because the record speaks for itself. She's just one of those fighters that really doesn't do much in the octagon, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but to be honest with you, she's just not that good. And Victoria Dudakova, people have been really hyped on Victoria Dudakova because obviously she is very promotable. While she's not like a complete 10 out of 10 or anything, you know, like it's definitely better than what we've most seen in the strawweight division, and people are really high on her for that reason. But Victoria Dudakova, besides that, the reason that I mentioned that she's very promotable is because the UFC definitely wants her to keep winning, matching her up against Jinh Yu Frey, because I believe this is a mismatch, man. Victoria Dudakova is somebody in the division that actually has skill, can actually wrestle, can actually submit people, and can actually finish people. She is a very good fighter, and while the technique isn't perfect, like, I'm not saying she's up there with, like, Wei Li or anybody like them. I just believe she is better than any other fighter like Jinh Yu Frey, and the UFC knew what they were doing with this matchup. They want to promote her, especially on, like, a big card like this. Give me Victoria Dudakova, and I actually might consider betting on this one, to be honest with you. She's just a better fighter. Moving on to the next fight, guys, I am actually incredibly excited for this fight, mostly because it's one of those fights where I'm like, I could see both guys winning. We have Nathaniel Wood taking on Muhammad Naimov. Now, I do want to start with Naimov because, man, did he storm into the UFC looking good. Before that, he has a record, of course, of 8-2, and he's looked okay. He has a very good striking background, but then he had this fight against Jimmy Mullarkey. He took the fight on short notice. He was fast, but it is important to mention that he was just a little tad behind the entire time. But he ended up, not long afterwards, landing a huge shot to win the fight. The power and his kicks is something that is absolutely incredible. That's something that he showed that he can hang with a guy like in the UFC. But I do need to note that while everybody's really high on this guy because he did come in and he did smoke Jamie Mullarkey, he was a little bit of a tad behind at the beginning of the fight, okay? So this guy isn't some like amazing killer to come into the UFC. And to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that Nathaniel Wood is a 310 favorite. But Nathaniel Wood in himself is an amazing fighter. I really, really like this guy, especially at featherweight. Like, take a look at some of this guy's wins. While they aren't like top contender wins, this dude is coming out there and constantly, besides, of course, the recent fight with Casey Kenny, but then again, you could even argue that was 3 years ago, this dude comes in and he just looks better and better. And this guy is so, I love watching Nathaniel Wood fight. This is why it's really tough, because we have Muhammad Naimov, who we don't know exactly how he can handle a guy like Nathaniel Wood. We know the striking probably can. I would imagine he would have the edge there, right? I would imagine he'd have the edge there, especially with the power. But Nathaniel Wood could absolutely be one of those guys to open up the wrestling game. That's why it's so interesting to me. What happens if they strike? Can Nathaniel Wood get the better of him? I don't think so, but Nathaniel Wood can really, really explore the takedowns. That's why I am so excited for this fight, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to make a pick. Honestly, guys, I might have to lean towards the underdog here. I loved what I've seen from this guy's stand-up. The power and the speed were really, really nice to witness. Against my better judgment, going against a guy with only one UFC fight on short notice, I will pick Muhammad Naimov, but honestly, with this fight, I'm more of a 50-50 pick. Moving on to the next fight, and this is another interesting fight, guys. Like, this is actually one of the best cards of the year. I'm so excited to watch this. We have the return of Anshul Jubilee, taking on Mike Breeden. Now, long story short, guys, I think the minus 400 favorite here is pretty understandable. Anshul Jubilee has had a perfect go so far, and then finally made his UFC debut and actually just stormed and had a very, very nice win. He looked great, and he's looked great in the 7 wins that he's had so far. However, we have learned that I don't know how many times we should keep picking these prospects, guys, to be honest with you. But he's taking on Mike Breeden, and to be honest with you, 10-6 kind of speaks for itself. While he has had a couple wins in the past 5 years, as soon as he got into the UFC, it has been nothing but unfortunate a downfall. But he hasn't taken on like a horrible level of competition. The thing about the Terrence McKinney loss, though, is that I am kind of like, I wasn't necessarily on the train, but this is a fight where it really made me think like, okay, Mike Breeden, I don't know if he necessarily belongs in the UFC, because in that fight, he got TKO'd really, really quick, but the shots that Terrence McKinney was throwing honestly didn't really seem to land well. It's like he took a bunch of fights and then Mike just quit in there. That's not the attitude that I can really go along with when fighting a guy, especially a guy that seems to be as dangerous as Anshul Jubilee. This guy is a great wrestler with some hands to back it up. He has all the hype behind him right now, 7-0. I got to think that he's going to go in there and storm Mike Breeden like we have seen him do against every other fighter so far. I got to take Anshul Jubilee. I just don't have any faith in Mike Breeden, especially anymore, especially after the last performance. Left a very sour taste in my mouth. Give me Jubilee to win this fight, and I'm very confident in saying so. Moving on to the next fight, guys. We have Cedric Dumas taking on Abu Azaitar. Now, this is really tough. This is really tough because as we were talking about with sour performances, okay? Dumas had about the most sour performance I have seen in recent times, and it was actually against somebody who gives nothing but sour performances, against Cody Brundage. Okay, in this fight, it was one of the worst performances I have seen, especially with a win. He got a win by doing nothing. Brundage took the fight on short notice, had absolutely no gas tank. Dumas found himself still getting taken down and did nothing when he was on top the whole fight. Brundage was literally turtling and laying down the entire time while Dumas didn't do a single thing. He got a win by doing nothing. That left such a sour taste in my mouth that I was like, I don't care who this guy fights next. I'm betting against him. The problem is he's taking on Captain Morocco. This guy is a very inactive striker. This guy doesn't do too much, and we haven't seen him in almost 3 years, and he's coming off of a knockout. So I'm like, oh, I don't know anymore. Because Abu Azaitar isn't necessarily like a trash fighter or anything like that, but he's just inactive. He doesn't do much. You know what I mean? There's nothing about him that screams impressive. He's just a fighter that comes in, and it's like, it's Abu Azaitar. He's here. You know what I mean? Other than that, like his record, he has a good record. He has a good record, but like nothing about him screams like he's going to win this fight. He's 37 years old, coming off of such a long layoff. At least Dumas has some power behind his hands. You know? That's why I'm like, I don't know anymore, because I was like, I don't care who Dumas is fighting. I'm betting against him. And Dumas in himself, while he's 8-1, he hasn't necessarily shown that he has like a huge level of technique behind him. He's 28 years old, at least coming into his prime. I'm almost picking Dumas just because of the youth and the strength. That's the entire reason. I don't like that Abu Zaitar has been off for almost 3 years. He's 37 years old now, coming back in the middleweight division against a guy who at least has some power to him. You know what I mean? Again, you know what? I don't care. I'm picking Abu Zaitar to win this fight. I said after this fight with Dumas that I would never pick him again. I never would. And I'm picking a Zaitar to win this fight. Although, I mean, I'm not very confident in that pick. It's just like, what a sour performance, man. Holy. Moving on to the next fight, another fight that I'm incredibly excited for. We have Javid Basharat taking on Victor Henry. Now, if you guys don't know, if you guys haven't followed the channel, I am a big Basharat brother fans. Not unlike so many prospects that would come into the UFC and the hype train just get absolutely derailed. I am totally behind these guys. I love what they do. I love their skill sets, and Basharat has had nothing but excellent performances so far. I am so in love with these guys' skill sets. While the level of competition could be better, it's not like he's fighting any trash at all. Basharat has been taking on great competition, good competition so far, and he's passed that with flying colors. He's taking on Victor Henry, who is a good fighter in himself. Like, he's one of those guys who has like a decent all-around skill set, has very nice cardio, aging at this point though, 36 years old. He's had some wins, he's had some losses that were like, you know, he's looked okay sometimes. Sometimes he hasn't looked good. You know what I mean? Like, especially like in this loss against the Sun Sao, it's like, I don't know if he necessarily should have lost this one. Bounced back with a split decision. Like, Victor Henry's one of those fighters that is just like one of those regular UFC guys who, I don't mean to be disrespectful at all, but like, he will never get anywhere. But he's not a can at all. You know what I mean? He's just like one of those mid-tier fighters. However, I do think that Basharat will utilize any skill that he wants to come to the octagon with. These guys have a fantastic ground game. I think Basharat, there is a huge skill level difference in this fight, and I think Basharat will coast his way to a decision to win against Victor Henry. I believe Victor Henry will last in this fight. Give me Basharat to win this fight, though. I'm so high on these guys. Moving on to the next fight, we have Muhammad Yahya taking on Trevor Peek. Now, a lot of people are high on Muhammad Yahya coming to the UFC because this guy looks like he has potential, to be honest with you. I'm not overly convinced of anything that I've seen from him. He's an okay striker with a fantastic gas tank, and that could be utilized against Trevor Peek. I love watching Trevor Peek fight. Here's the thing. Trevor Peek, yeah, I know what's going to come with him. He's going to come in. He's going to have a sloppy war. That's what you got to look forward to with Trevor Peek. So the question is, can Trevor Peek come in and utilize his game plan? For the first time, it's worked out for his entire career so far, but then we finally saw Chepe Mariscal, who I believe is a great fighter in himself. He finally met his match, and Chepe ended up getting a nice win there. So that was a typical Trevor Peek fight. He won. It was like an absolute 3-round war. The thing that we really learned from Peek, though, in that fight is that he gasses hard, but at the same time, it's one of those weird gas tanks because we watched him gas in that fight. And then we've watched him fight through every little bit of exhaustion, constantly throwing bombs, constantly trying to finish the fight. I can understand with what I just said, it might not seem like Trevor Peek is gassed, but you know those fighters who can just fight through that exhaustion? Trevor Peek did that. He was like, like looking like he was really suffering in there, right? But then he would come in with like 2 more bombs. Like, this dude gasses, but at the same time, he fights through the exhaustion. I don't know exactly what to make with that. You know what I mean? So the entire thing is here, can Trevor Peek catch him? Can Trevor Peek drag Yahya into a war? How's Yahya's chin? We don't exactly know that because he hasn't really fought a good level of competition yet. So assuming the thing we do know about Muhammad is he has a very good gas tank, okay? Very good gas tank. He could utilize that against Trevor Peek, but that's if you can survive what Trevor Peek does. This will be a striking match, and that's why I'm not entirely sure who to pick here. I will go with Trevor Peek because at least like in this fight that he lost against Chepe Mariscal, he could have won. If Chepe didn't have the chin that he did, Trevor Peek would have won this fight. So I don't trust Yahya yet. I'm going to go with Trevor Peek reluctantly, though. Reluctantly. It's certainly not a fight to bet on. Moving on to the next fight, another absolute banger. We have Tim Elliott taking on Muhammad Mokaev. Now, guys, I will start with Mokaev because I am not convinced of this guy yet. I really am not. He comes in there, he storms you, he wants to get the ground game working, but while he has racked up some nice wins and he's looked very dominant doing so, or in some fights he's looked dominant doing so. There have been some fights where he's looked like, okay, like Charles Johnson made it quite competitive, you know what I mean? We haven't exactly seen him have a perfect record. We've almost seen him get finished, okay? This dude is coming in like he's some killer, but I'm not convinced at all. He gets the job done. He overcomes some adversity, and sometimes he looks very dominant doing so. I'm just not convinced yet. I do not think he should be a -500 favorite. I will tell you that. He's taking on Tim Elliott, who is a great fighter, honestly. Very scrappy, has a great ground game, very, very slick. And now we have the divorced Tim Elliott, the new mythical fighter, right? He has had a little bit of a career resurgence as of lately. You could see winning 4 of his last 5. And honestly, in most of his fights, he's looked very good. And especially in his last fight, like he was very active on the ground as always. And a lot of people were picking him to really lose this fight. The striking, though, in typical Tim Elliott style, was poor. He's really open on the feet, but like the thing is that really doesn't necessarily matter because Mokaev is going to come in and probably try to take Tim Elliott down, but Tim Elliott is insanely slick on the ground. I actually don't mind Tim Elliott's chances here. Something about you know what, guys? I'm going to pick Tim Elliott. I'm not insanely confident on that pick, but I think his ground game is very slick. This dude is scrappy. We know he can fight through anything. And another thing to note is we don't know how Mokaev's health is because this dude, I haven't been following it entirely, to be honest with you. But this dude has been having like surgery issues. I don't know if he got a surgery or if anything like that, but he could be coming into this fight injured, but don't like weigh too much on that. I think Tim Elliott is scrappy. He's a veteran. He's looked great for his age. I think this is a decent matchup for him, to be honest with you, because I'm like, if Tim Elliott's fighting a striker who isn't worried about takedowns, he'll get knocked out. But Tim Elliott is fighting a guy who's going to try and storm and take him down, and I like Tim Elliott's ground game. This could age badly, but I'm going to pick Tim Elliott, guys. I'm picking Tim Elliott to win this fight, the new mythical divorced Tim Elliott to win this fight. Hey, guys, apologies to pause the video here, but I will have a new betting guide video coming out. If you guys are very interested, we're just promoting it now. If you want, or if you are interested in the official plays that I will be making, I do my best to be a very conservative bettor. I do my best to make like a little bit of money, but safe money every single week. If you are interested in seeing my official plays every single card, I will be posting them for the membership in the community tab every Thursday or Friday. So if you're interested, join the membership. Very, very cheap, by the way, compared to what other people will charge you. But if you're interested, again, I try to be as safe as possible. If you want to see my official plays, check out the membership on the channel, guys. Thank you so much. Let's get back into the video. Moving on to the next banger of the card, we have Said Nurmagomedov taking on Muin Gafurov. Now, I'll start with Muin Gafurov because a lot of people thought he should be in the UFC a lot quicker than when he was, but I don't know what I was doing this day. I never got back to watching this fight. The Chad Angler fight, apparently a lot of people were like up in roar about him really losing this split decision in the Contender Series. So I don't know. A lot of people thought he should be signed to the UFC before that, but I will say either I must have missed that card or I don't remember watching this fight. I just haven't seen this myself, so I don't really have an opinion on whether or not he won this fight, but I have watched him in LFA, and he has carried some very nice power behind his fans, and he showed that in LFA, looking very good. He has some wrestling to back up his striking. He is a pretty good fighter, Muin Gafurov. But, of course, he came in and he lost his first fight in the UFC against John Castaneda. Nothing you can do there. 1 month ago, like, I still really like what I've seen from Muin Gafurov, but he's taken on Said Nurmagomedov. This dude has looked fantastic in the UFC so far. Win after win after win after win. But this fight with Jonathan Martinez, I remember it being close, okay? Both guys had a good performance, honestly. And Jonathan Martinez, this loss has aged very well. Look at what just happened with Jonathan Martinez. I don't remember who I thought won, but I remember it being close enough to not care. You know what I mean? A lot of people were like up in roar that Nurmagomedov won this fight. It was close. Doesn't matter. He lost the fight. That's where I'm kind of sitting at. So both these guys have a good wrestling game, have good power, have very good striking. I would imagine this fight's going to stay on the feet. But and for that reason, while Gafurov may, and that's a big maybe, may have the power advantage, I like Said Nurmagomedov's stand-up a lot. He's a lot slicker. He's a lot better on the feet. He's one of those Nurmagomedovs that has a complete round game, and I really like that about him. I think Said is actually going to win this fight, and I think he's going to make it look fairly easy. While Gafurov isn't a bad fighter whatsoever, I just think Said is just a little bit of a level up in competition compared to him. Give me Said Nurmagomedov to win this fight. Moving on to the next fight with Ikram Aliskerov taking on Warlley Alves. Now, guys, long story short, I think this is a very, very good fight for Aliskerov to win. He's had a perfect record so far coming to the UFC. Well, not he has one loss, but I mean, like, since he came into the UFC, he's looked very, very good against Mario Souza, and then looked amazing against Phil Hawes. So this dude, I'm almost convinced that he could be a huge problem at middleweight. I don't mind the minus 400 on him. I'm very high on him to win this fight. He has that style where he's going to come in, he's going to take you down, he's going to control you, but he does have hands to back that up. This dude is a very good fighter. He's taking on Warlley Alves, one of the most inconsistent fighters in UFC history. Warlley Alves, though, he does have a chance. You know, you could always knock him out, right? But to be fair, Warlley Alves is fairly, inactive in the past couple of years, but There's nothing about Warlley Alves that really makes me think he could really defend against Iliscarov's takedowns. He could strike with Iliscarov. Iliscarov has some power too. Like, Warlley Alves, to be honest with you, he's one of those fighters where he can land on you. He could possibly knock you out, but that is just like one of those, okay, Ikram got caught type situations. So I like Ikram Iliscarov a lot in this matchup. Give me him for my pick. Moving on to the featured bout, we have Magomed Ankalaev taking on Johnny Walker. So Magomed Ankalaev has looked like a straight killer. A straight killer, besides the Paul Craig fight, of course, but he is very dominant, looking very good. You know what you get with Magomed Ankalaev. Very, very heavy control, very good, nice cardio, you know what I mean? But he didn't look so good against Jan Blachowicz, but you could argue that was because Jan Blachowicz is just a great fighter in himself. I don't really know what to make of that one, and it's like tough to say who won that fight, really, but Ankalaev, other than that, has looked great in his career. Now, Johnny Walker has had quite the career resurgence after everybody constantly counting him out, right? We have figured out that Johnny Walker does have a little bit of a chin issue, but other than that, he had a really nice win against Ion Cutelaba. Paul Craig absolutely destroyed, and then really beat up Anthony Smith in a little bit of an inactive fight, but like he was a little bit of a step ahead through Anthony Smith. So Johnny Walker, since he moved over to Ireland, he has looked really, really good in his career. Like, I'm not necessarily on the Johnny Walker train at all, but I'm not going to count him out. Now, something to note is Johnny Walker, with his power, you can never count him out. He could always catch Magomed Ankalaev. And I'm not like, while Ankalaev has looked very, very good in the division, he's very dominant, he's very good at controlling the fight, right? I see a world where Johnny Walker could catch him. I just see it. I don't know why. It wouldn't shock me if Johnny Walker found a KO, but I have to go with, especially after Johnny Walker's lackluster fight with Anthony Smith, I got to think that Magomed Ankalaev is going to go in there and do what we all know that Magomed Ankalaev is going to do. He's going to go in there. He's going to control the fight, whether he wants it on the feet or on the ground. He's going to be in control, a little bit of a step ahead about Johnny Walker. I imagine this being a little bit of a boring fight. I'm going to pick Magomed Ankalaev, but I will not be shocked if Johnny Walker does end up pulling it off. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Kamaru Usman stepping in on short notice, 10 or 11 days notice, taking on Khamzat Chimaev. Now, Kamaru Usman, a lot of people believe, is the greatest welterweight of all time, or the second greatest welterweight of all time. He's had a near-perfect record until, of course, he ran into Leon Edwards, where he was dominant in this fight, got knocked out, and then looked old and completely out of his prime after that 6 months ago against Leon Edwards in the other decision that he had here. 36 years old, Kamaru Usman is absolutely aging. That's something to note. Now, Khamzat Chimaev, this dude had nothing but easy fights so far. Like, I don't mean like he's taken on an easy level of competition. I mean, he's made his opponents look easy, except for Gilbert Burns, where we saw that he finally looked human. You know what I mean? He finally looked human. Now, something to note is that Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman train together, so make of that what you will. I don't think, especially on 10 days notice, Gilbert Burns can really give any insight to Kamaru Usman like, oh, Khamzat Chimaev was really strong. You know what I mean? I don't think there's enough time to prepare for a guy like Khamzat Chimaev. Here's the thing. It's in the middleweight division. I don't know how Kamaru Usman's going to look at middleweight. We've seen Khamzat Chimaev at middleweight. This is 10 days notice or 11 days notice for Kamaru Usman. Coming off the couch, Kamaru Usman, there's been a lot of talk that his knees are shot, and especially in this last fight against Leon Edwards, he looked completely out of his prime. I don't believe Kamaru Usman was the same fighter that we even saw a year ago or even 2 years ago against Jorge Masvidal. He has aged, and Khamzat Chimaev, 20 years old, looked so dominant. He's going to storm in there. I believe Khamzat Chimaev is going to take him down and get a TKO win. Unfortunately, I cannot pick Kamaru Usman. I don't even give him a puncher's chance, to be honest with you. I think Khamzat Chimaev is too big, too imposing, too aggressive, and Kamaru Usman won't be able to handle that. Give me Khamzat Chimaev for the pick. I'm very confident in saying so. Moving on to the main event of the evening, we have the rematch between Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski. Now, guys, another fight where Alexander Volkanovski is taking this fight on 10, 11 days notice. We know he's coming off of hand surgery. We know he's coming off of the couch, okay? I can't pick Alexander Volkanovski in this fight. Islam Makhachev, okay? He's had nothing but a perfect record. He's looked fantastic. He's stormed everybody. He has an amazing ground game and amazing hands to back it up. He is an amazing, amazing fighter. I do believe he lost against Alexander Volkanovski. I believe they robbed Alexander Volkanovski of history. I thought Alexander Volkanovski won a close fight. So I'm looking at Alexander Volkanovski with a perfect record in his last 5, okay? That's how I see him. That's how I view this fight. Alexander Volkanovski, in my opinion, is the greatest fighter of all time, period, to ever do it. I truthfully believe that. Now, Alexander Volkanovski, after his fight against Islam Makhachev, destroyed Yair Rodriguez. Islam Makhachev hasn't had a fight since, when that was only 7 months ago, but still. It's so tough because I cannot back Alexander Volkanovski. I can't. He's 35 years old now. His day is coming. He's coming off of hand surgery. He's coming off the couch, and he hasn't had time to prepare or bulk up for 155. He is a 145-pound champion. I can't pick him. But I've said this same stuff in the build-up to the first fight, where it was like, you're an idiot if you're picking if you're picking Alexander Volkanovski to beat Islam Makhachev. That's what I was saying. And then Alexander Volkanovski went out there and backed up everything that he said. He's saying the same things now. He could potentially come in there and do the exact same thing. He could come in there and he could prove all the doubters like myself wrong. But even in knowing that he proved us all wrong the first time against all the odds in the world, I can't pick him to win, man. I just can't do it. I can't pick a guy who hasn't been prepared for Islam Makhachev. Makhachev could have been preparing for the toughest fight of his life. He has Khabib and Kane back in his corner, back and coaching him, back training with him. He's probably preparing for the most dangerous Charles Oliveira of all time. I can't imagine that Alexander Volkanovski is going to win this fight. Coming off of surgery, coming off the couch, no notice whatsoever. I can't pick him. I just can't. But I'm never picking against Alexander Volkanovski again if he makes this fight even fairly competitive, okay? I'm picking Islam Makhachev, but something my gut's telling me, like, Alexander might be able to pull it off, you know what I mean? But guys, with that being said, puts an end to this full card breakdown and prediction video today. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. On the screen right now, and look out, we have a betting guide coming out later today, so on the screen right now, if you'd like to continue watching the Klembat channel, there'll be 2 videos for you on screen. I will see you either there or in the next video, guys. Take care.